The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the overhead lights and the occasional rustle of paper. A long mahogany table stretched between two delegations, one draped in tailored suits and polished shoes, the other in military fatigues and quiet resolve. At the head sat Ibrahim Traoré, his posture straight, his gaze steady. Stacks of documents loomed before him, each page a promise, a trap, or both. The Chinese tycoon leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes gleaming with the confidence of someone who'd sealed 100 deals just like this. He had flown in with a convoy, a media team, and a contract that weighed more than the hopes of a nation. Traoré flipped through the pages slowly, methodically. Page 34, Infrastructure. Page 89, Mineral Rights. Page 142, Arbitration Clauses. Then, page 178. He stopped. His eyes scanned the lines once. Then again. His jaw tightened. The room felt colder. What Ibrahim Traoré saw on page 178 didn't just kill the deal. It sent shockwaves across 3 continents. He didn't speak. Not yet. But the tycoon shifted in his seat, sensing something had gone wrong. Advisors leaned in, whispering. One aide reached for his phone, instinctively. Traoré looked up, his voice calm but cutting. Did you think we wouldn't read this far? The tycoon blinked. No answer. Traoré slid the page across the table, tapping the clause with a single finger. You buried this like a secret. But secrets don't survive in daylight. No one moved. No one spoke. The air was thick with revelation. But the clause was just the beginning. What Traoré did next stunned even his closest advisors. Burkina Faso had been standing at a crossroads. Years of instability, economic hardship, and foreign interference had left scars across its landscape and psyche. Roads crumbled, hospitals lacked basic supplies, and young people, bright, determined, were leaving in search of opportunity elsewhere. The promise of renewal wasn't just political rhetoric. It was survival. Enter the tycoon. He arrived with $1 billion proposal wrapped in glossy brochures and grand promises. High-speed rail, solar farms, a tech corridor that would rival Nairobi. His team spoke of transformation, of turning Ouagadougou into a regional powerhouse. The numbers dazzled, the renderings seduced. And for a nation hungry for progress, it felt like hope. The deal was more than infrastructure. It was a lifeline, jobs for thousands, a chance to leapfrog decades of underdevelopment, a seat at the table in a global economy that had long ignored them. Ministers leaned in. Advisors nodded. The media buzzed with cautious optimism. But beneath the surface, something felt off. The tycoon's charm was polished, but rehearsed. His answers, evasive. His entourage, tight-lipped. And the contract, thousands of pages long, arrived with urgency, but little transparency. Traoré, ever the soldier-scholar, insisted on reading every word. He knew Burkina Faso's strategic importance. Nestled in West Africa, rich in gold and rare earth minerals, it had become a quiet battleground for influence. Chinese, Russian, Western. Whoever controlled its resources controlled a piece of the future. And so, Traoré read. Page after page, clause after clause. Promises of investment, yes. But also conditions. Quiet concessions. Subtle shifts in control. Until page 178. That's where the mask slipped. A clause so buried, so deceptively worded, it threatened the very sovereignty of the nation. It wasn't just about land or money. It was about power. About who would truly own Burkina Faso's future. Everyone thought this deal would change Burkina Faso's future. They were right, but not in the way they expected. Because Traoré wasn't just reading a contract. He was reading a warning. And what he did next would ignite a firestorm across Africa. He was known across boardrooms from Beijing to Brazzaville as the architect, not for building cities, but for building empires. His name rarely appeared in headlines, but his fingerprints were everywhere. Mining contracts, telecom monopolies, and infrastructure deals that left governments dazzled and citizens disillusioned. The Chinese tycoon arrived in Ouagadougou like royalty. A convoy of black SUVs rolled through the capital, flanked by private security and PR handlers. His suit was custom-tailored, his watch worth more than a village's annual budget. He didn't shake hands, he offered nods. He didn't greet officials, he summoned them. To him, Burkina Faso was just another tile in his mosaic of influence. A small nation with big resources and, in his view, limited leverage. He had done this before, in Zambia, where a copper deal left local workers unpaid and rivers poisoned. In Sierra Leone, where a port project stalled after land seizures sparked protests. And in Madagascar, where leaked documents revealed a clause allowing his company to bypass environmental regulations entirely. He didn't negotiate. He dictated. Local ministers were ushered into conference rooms like interns. Questions were brushed aside. Concerns were met with condescension. One official who raised objections was quietly removed from the delegation. Another, who leaked early drafts of the contract, found his home mysteriously raided days later. Behind the scenes, his empire ran on silence. Journalists who probed too deeply were sued into oblivion. Activists who organized resistance campaigns found themselves targeted by smear operations. His legal team was legendary, not for defending truth, but for burying it. And yet, his reputation remained intact in elite circles. He was the man who got things done, who understood Africa, who brought development. But development, in his world, came with strings, and those strings often became shackles. The contract he brought to Burkina Faso was no different. Glossy on the surface, toxic underneath. It promised roads, but demanded land. Promised jobs, but outsourced labor. Promised partnership, but delivered control. And buried deep, on page 178, was the clause. A sovereignty waiver. Worded in legalese, masked as a strategic cooperation framework, it granted his company exclusive rights to manage and profit from key mineral zones for 99 years. No oversight. No local input. No exit clause. It was a blueprint for quiet colonization. He assumed it would pass unnoticed. That the hunger for investment would eclipse caution. That Traoré, like others before him, would nod, sign, and smile for the cameras. But this time, he underestimated the one man who wouldn't play along. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't born into power. He was born into purpose. Raised in a modest home in Kara, he grew up watching his parents navigate a system that rarely worked for them. His mother, a schoolteacher, taught him that dignity wasn't given, it was defended. His father, a farmer, taught him that land wasn't just soil, it was identity. These lessons stayed with him long after he traded notebooks for rifles. He joined the military young, not for glory, but for grit. In the barracks, he earned respect not through rank, but through resolve. He was the soldier who stayed behind to protect civilians when others retreated. The officer who refused bribes from foreign contractors. The commander who asked not what was easy, but what was right. When Burkina Faso's political landscape began to fracture, Traoré didn't chase power, it chased him. Citizens, weary of corruption and foreign meddling, saw in him something rare, a leader who listened. A patriot who didn't flinch. A man who could walk through a market without bodyguards and leave with blessings instead of fear. His rise wasn't orchestrated in backrooms. It was forged in protests, in late-night strategy sessions with youth leaders, in quiet conversations with elders who remembered what sovereignty once felt like. When he took office, he didn't promise miracles. He promised honesty, and he delivered it with steel in his spine. Traoré's nationalism wasn't performative. It was personal. He rejected foreign military bases. He demanded transparency in trade deals. He spoke of Burkina Faso not as a pawn, but as a pillar, a nation that would no longer be bought, bullied, or buried under debt disguised as development. He walked into the negotiation room with the tycoon not as a supplicant, but as a sentinel. Behind him stood a nation bruised but unbroken. Around him sat advisors who knew his silence often meant strategy. And in front of him lay a contract that would either honor his vision or betray it. He didn't skim the pages. He studied them. Every clause, every comma. Because he knew that sovereignty wasn't lost in speeches, it was lost in signatures. And then came page 178. A sentence. A waiver. A trap. It was written to look harmless. To sound cooperative. But Traoré saw through it. He saw the erosion of autonomy, the quiet theft of future generations' rights. He saw the same pattern that had played out in other nations, where leaders signed away their people's dignity for short-term gain. But Traoré wasn't built for compromise. He was built for confrontation. And that vision, of a sovereign Burkina Faso, proud and unyielding, was about to be tested by a single sentence buried deep in a contract. The tycoon's voice cut through the room like a blade. Polished, assertive, rehearsed. He gestured toward the contract with a flourish, speaking of mutual prosperity, strategic alignment, and unprecedented opportunity. His words were smooth, but his eyes betrayed urgency. He wanted this signed now. Traoré didn't respond. He turned another page. The tycoon leaned forward, tapping his pen against the table. Mr. President, we've outlined every benefit. The numbers speak for themselves. This is a generational leap for Burkina Faso. Traoré glanced up, expression unreadable. Generational for whom? A flicker of irritation crossed the tycoon's face. He forced a smile. For your people, of course. Jobs. Roads. Technology. We're offering partnership. Traoré nodded slowly, then returned to the document. Page 156. Page 163. Page 171. The tycoon shifted in his seat. His legal advisor whispered something in Mandarin. One of Traoré's ministers leaned toward him, voice low. We've reviewed the executive summary. It's clean. Traoré didn't look up. Summaries are written to be clean. The room grew tense. The tycoon's PR handler checked his watch. Aides exchanged glances. Cameras, once poised for a celebratory photo op, remained idle. Traoré spoke again, voice calm. Why is the arbitration jurisdiction listed as Xinjiang? The tycoon blinked. Standard procedure. Our legal team is based there. Traoré raised an eyebrow. So if Burkina Faso disputes a clause, we must fly to China to argue our case. No answer. Another page turned. The tycoon's tone sharpened. Mr. President, we've invested months preparing this. We've come in good faith. Traoré didn't flinch. Faith is not a substitute for fairness. The tycoon's smile faded. Then Traoré stopped flipping. He leaned forward. And read the clause out loud. Silence fell. The words echoed like a verdict. Advisors froze. The tycoon's face drained of color. One aide dropped their pen. And just like that, the negotiation turned into a reckoning. Traoré's voice rang out, crisp and deliberate. Clause 7.14.3. In the interest of strategic cooperation, the Republic of Burkina Faso shall grant exclusive management rights over designated mineral zones to the investing party for a period not less than 99 years, with limited oversight from domestic agencies. The words hung in the air like smoke. No one spoke. The tycoon's face remained frozen, but his fingers twitched. His legal advisor leaned in, whispering frantically. Traoré didn't flinch. He stood, slowly, calmly, like a man who knew the weight of what he was about to do. This clause, he said, holding the page aloft, is not cooperation. It is surrender. He turned to his delegation. 99 years. That's longer than most of our citizens will live. Longer than our children's children will remember this room. And for what? A road? A port? A promise. The tycoon cleared his throat. Mr. President, this is standard language in international development contracts. It ensures stability. Traoré cut him off. Stability for whom? The tycoon hesitated. For both parties. Traoré stepped forward. Let me read you something else. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn copy of Burkina Faso's constitution. Pages marked, corners bent. He flipped to a section and read aloud. Article 14. The natural resources of Burkina Faso belong to the people. Their exploitation shall be conducted in the interest of national sovereignty and public welfare. He looked up. This clause violates our constitution. It violates our dignity. It violates the very idea that Burkina Faso is a nation, not a commodity. The room was silent. Even the tycoon's entourage had stopped whispering. Traoré continued. You came here with cameras and contracts. You came here expecting applause. You came here thinking we were desperate enough to trade our future for your fortune. He held up the page again. But you forgot one thing. We read everything. The tycoon tried again. Mr. President, we can renegotiate. We can adjust the terms. Traoré's voice sharpened. You buried this clause on page 178. You didn't mention it in your summary. You didn't highlight it in your presentation. You hoped we wouldn't find it. That is not negotiation. That is deception. One of Traoré's aides, seated near the back, quietly lifted their phone and began recording. The angle was discreet, but the audio was clear. The moment was already being captured. Traoré turned to his advisors. Look at this clause. Look at what it demands. Exclusive control. Limited oversight. 99 years. That is not partnership. That is occupation. He paused. And we have seen occupation before. The room shifted. Ministers sat straighter. Eyes widened. The tycoon's face had lost its sheen. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Traoré walked to the head of the table and placed the contract down with finality. This deal is dead. No one moved. Then, slowly, one advisor began to clap. Another followed. Within seconds, the room erupted in applause, not polite, but thunderous. A release of tension, a declaration of pride. The tycoon remained seated, stunned. His legal team began packing documents. His PR handler stared at the floor. Traoré didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply turned to his delegation. We will build our future, but we will build it ourselves. The aide's recording continued. The clip was short, just under 2 minutes. But it captured everything. The clause, the constitution, the takedown, the applause. And the real explosion came hours later, when the footage hit the internet. The clip hit the internet like a lightning strike. 2 minutes. No music. No filters. Just Ibrahim Traoré standing tall, reading the clause, quoting the constitution, and declaring the deal dead. Within hours, it was everywhere. Traoré clause began trending across Africa. TikTok flooded with edits, slow-motion zooms on Traoré's face, dramatic overlays of "We read everything," and remixes that turned his takedown into an anthem. Instagram Reels showed youth in Ghana, Kenya, and Senegal reenacting the moment, fists raised, voice proud. Commentators called it Africa's diplomatic awakening. Analysts on Al Jazeera and France 24 dissected every word. This wasn't just a rejection, one said. It was a declaration that Africa is no longer for sale. In university halls from Lagos to Lusaka, students debated the implications. In WhatsApp groups, activists shared the clip with captions like, "This is how you lead." Even diaspora communities in Paris, Toronto, and New York rallied around the moment, posting messages of solidarity and pride. The ripple effect was immediate. In Namibia, lawmakers demanded a review of recent mining contracts. In Uganda, opposition leaders cited Traoré's speech in parliamentary debates. In Cameroon, a youth-led petition called for transparency in foreign infrastructure deals, quoting page 178 as a symbol of vigilance. Chinese officials scrambled. The tycoon's PR team issued a vague statement about miscommunication and respect for sovereignty. But the damage was done. The footage had exposed a pattern, and Traoré had shattered the silence. He became more than a president. He became a symbol. A mural appeared overnight in downtown Ouagadougou. Traoré, standing with a contract in one hand and the Constitution in the other. Beneath it, the words, "We read everything." But Traoré didn't bask in the praise. He didn't tweet. He didn't gloat. Instead, he called a press conference. The room was packed. Cameras rolled. Microphones lined the podium. He stepped forward, eyes steady. "We are not against partnership," he said. "We are against submission." He paused. "Our minerals are not just rocks. They are the inheritance of our children. Our land is not just soil. It is the memory of our ancestors. And our dignity is not negotiable." The crowd erupted. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. The clip went viral again. This time, not for the takedown, but for the truth. And yet, Traoré wasn't done. His final statement turned the moment into a movement. The sun had barely risen when Ibrahim Traoré stepped onto the podium. The crowd stretched far beyond the square, spilling into side streets and balconies. Some held flags. Others held signs. But most simply stood, silent, waiting. He looked out at them, not as a ruler, but as a son of the soil. A soldier turned servant. A man who had read every word, every clause, and chosen dignity over deals. "We are not for sale," he began. The words were simple, but they landed like thunder. "This nation," he continued, "was not built by contracts. It was built by courage, by farmers who tilled the land with bare hands, by teachers who taught without books, by mothers who raised children in the face of hardship, and by youth who refused to leave, choosing instead to stay and fight for something better." He held up the contract, the one with the buried clause, the one that promised progress but demanded submission. "This is not partnership. This is exploitation dressed in diplomacy." The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others clenched fists. Traoré's voice rose. "They offered us roads, but asked for our minerals. They offered us jobs, but demanded our silence. They offered us progress, but buried our sovereignty on page 178. He paused. But we read everything. The crowd erupted. Cheers echoed through the square. Flags waved. Phones rose to capture the moment. This clause, he said, is not just about land. It is about legacy. It is about whether our children will inherit a nation or a contract, whether they will walk freely or under foreign terms, whether they will speak with pride or apology. He stepped forward. We are not against the world. We are part of it. But we will not be its victim. We will not be its bargain. He looked into the cameras. To every young African watching this, your voice matters. Your vigilance matters. Your leadership is not in the future. It is now. He turned to his ministers. Let this be a lesson, not just for Burkina Faso, but for every nation that has been told to accept less, to settle, to sign. He raised the Constitution. This is our contract. With our people, with our ancestors, with our future. The applause was deafening. In homes across the continent, families watched with tears. In classrooms, students replayed the speech. In offices, workers paused to listen. And in the diaspora, pride surged like a wave. Commentators called it a turning point. Activists called it a blueprint. Elders called it long overdue. But Traoré didn't speak for headlines. He spoke for history. We may be small, he said, but we are not weak. We may be young, but we are not naive. We may be offered deals, but we will never be bought. He stepped back. And as the world watched, one thing became clear. Africa had found its voice. It was just one page, one clause, one moment. Page 178, buried deep in a contract meant to reshape a nation. But instead of signing away sovereignty, Ibrahim Traoré turned it into a rallying cry. His refusal wasn't just about minerals or land. It was about memory, identity, and the unshakable belief that dignity cannot be negotiated. In a world where deals are struck behind closed doors and silence is often bought, Traoré chose to speak. Loudly, clearly, unapologetically. He reminded us that leadership isn't measured by wealth or alliances. It's measured by courage. That true power lies not in what you accept, but in what you reject. And that sometimes, the most revolutionary act is simply reading the fine print. This wasn't just a political moment. It was a moral one. So if you believe in sovereignty over submission, in truth over convenience, in leaders who serve rather than sell, this story is yours. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines. Share this video if you believe dignity is non-negotiable. Because page 178 was never just a clause. It was a line in the sand. And Traoré drew it for all of us.